Adam Friedman of Rivals, their rankings director, does a lot with the portal as well. All right, Adam, we can all date ourselves in different ways here. Well, 30 years ago, what do you remember, if anything, about the OJ chase here as it hit on this day?
I don't remember a thing from the OJ chase. I was probably, playing with my tricycle, riding around on my parents' driveway.
All right, there we are. Yeah, on the trike, they don't tell you about the OJ chase very much.
No.
I was saying that was my 6th grade class trip. So there we are. It's funny how things define you over the years. All right, Adam, let's get into it. We last had you on, I want to say it was like a week or two after Fran Brown got hired, and like all this recruiting stuff was exploding, and we up here in Syracuse didn't know what to do with ourselves because we'd never seen anything like this before. Now we're 6-7 months in, and it hasn't stopped. They have more recruits for class of 2025 than almost any other school out there. What are you making of what Fran is doing at Syracuse right now, recruiting wise?
Well, he's continuing on, like you said, with this incredible momentum that he's brought to upstate New York there. He's got 22 commitments already. He's brought in some really impressive playmakers from the high school level to go with those transfer prospects that he brought in at the end of last cycle, and I think he's building that foundation for not only immediate improvement but future success. Yeah,
we look at it because there was a ton of portal as well. In the portal and freshman recruiting for the class of 2024, it's about half the scholarship players for next year. That was 40 some odd, and now he's already about a half of that toward next year as well. We look at the rankings, and obviously due to Syracuse is very high in the recruiting rankings right now. Is that sheerly a volume play at the moment, Adam? Is it because the quality is picked up? Is it a combo? What is it right now that's leading to success in the rankings?
Yeah, it's a little bit volume, but he does have some really good commitments from players who, frankly, Syracuse hasn't gotten in the past. They got an average stars per commitment of just over 3, and so that ranking that you're seeing at number 13 in the nation, it won't stick that high. They'll be somewhere in the 20s, maybe early 30s if that average rating remains the same come signing day. But at this point, you're looking at some really good players who are bumping that average stars per commit up. Charlandon Strange, a 4-star defensive end out of Pennsylvania, a 4-star quarterback, Luke Carney out of Texas. Those guys are already on board. Some really impressive players like you guys are very, very familiar with. Darian Williams, the receiver from up there in Syracuse. And there's a few other guys here who are helping that average stars per commit number stay pretty high, but as the other teams in the nation continue to pick up commitments, we're going to see Syracuse fall slightly, but still end up with a really good class this year. Syracuse hasn't had a recruiting class finish in the top 30 from before last year. I mean, it was, I think early 2000s when the last time they had a recruiting class rated that high. They finished number 35 in the nation in 2024 cycle, which was really impressive for a Syracuse team that hadn't had a whole lot of success in recent past.
And that boost up to a ranking even that high, Adam, that a chunk of what drove him up was basically 2 weeks that Fran did in December when he flipped some 4-stars when he signed on
exactly.
here. So, we've talked a lot about this with various people here on this show about we are used to Syracuse getting 3-star recruits. Most of these guys are 3-star recruits, but they're a different caliber, right? Can you explain the difference for us between like a high 3-star and a low 3-star when on the face of it, you see the 3, but it looks like these are different guys than Syracuse has gotten in the past.
Yeah, a high 3-star player, we have official definitions for how we break down the star ratings and players within each star rating, but a 3-star is considered probably in the top 800 prospects in the nation, potential all-conference candidate. We're thinking about those types of guys. They're more than likely going to be, the higher-end 3-stars more than likely are going to be anywhere between a 2nd and a 4th or 5th round draft pick. So, those are the types of players now that Syracuse has in these highly rated 3-stars, where we've got Darian Williams, that receiver I mentioned from up there in Syracuse, big offensive lineman Byron Washington out of DeSoto, Texas, 6'8", 380 pounds. You may have seen him go viral with some outstanding pictures from last season. I really like a defensive lineman that Syracuse got from the Pennington School in New Jersey, Halim Muhammad, a 6'5", 260-pound defensive lineman. That's a versatile skill set. I think he could play on the edge. He could play with his hand in the ground. He could play interior. He brings a certain level of athleticism to that defensive front that Syracuse doesn't have a ton of familiarity with. So it's going to be interesting to see how he develops there. So these are the types of players who are currently rated as a high 3-star prospect in the Syracuse class, and they look like they could be potential difference makers down the road. Lots of mid-level 3-stars in this class as well. A really interesting running back out of Roanoke, Virginia, Malachi Coleman, speedy guy, really productive. Doesn't play a ton of high-end competition from Virginia, but I think he's got a skill set that translates well. He's going to be a player that gets another look after his senior season to see if that rating needs to be changed. I also really like a defensive back. Jordan Gibbs brings some outstanding speed to the back end of the defense, and Fran Brown's familiarity with players in the secondary. He's got an excellent track record there, and I think if he singles out a guy like Gibbs with great speed and impressive measurables, 6'2", 170 pounds, or 6'2", 166 pounds. I think Fran Brown is a guy that we would trust with an evaluation like that. He sees a lot of potential in Jordan Gibbs. I like Terrell Wilfong, a receiver from New Jersey, another receiver from Pennsylvania, Julian McFadden. These are mid-level 3-stars who have a chance to turn out to be draft picks if they continue to develop at an impressive rate. And I think Syracuse having the strength and conditioning program that Fran Brown has revamped, impressive facilities, and the opportunity for playing time, I think there's going to be a much more explosive offense to help some of these receivers improve their draft stock, build an early draft stock earlier in their career. So I like these guys that Syracuse is bringing in, and like I said, building a strong foundation for the future. And these players going to end up finding themselves in the draft if all goes as planned. Well,
that would be very good news to hear from a Syracuse perspective. As we got Adam Friedman from Rivals.com with us. Syracuse fans did not need to partake in watching the draft this past year because there were no Orange players.
It'll be appointment viewing for you guys in the not too distant future. I promise you that.
Well, usually that comes along with winning some football games too. So lots of appointment viewing going on. The stars are one thing. The most telling thing to me, Adam, is the other offers, the seriously considered. Like, we've been used to around here a lot recently, like Syracuse beating out MAC schools for, half their class, give or take. Now, I feel it's almost all of the classes at minimum, like Syracuse is beating out like Pittsburgh, Boston College, Rutgers, West Virginia. And then some of these guys, you see that, like, holy crap, like half the SEC was after them, or the Big Ten was after these guys. What does it tell you about the caliber of these guys? I know you evaluate them, but, like, what other schools are looking at when they're also going against Syracuse for these players?
Yeah, these bigger schools, as you said, have singled out some of these players in Syracuse's class. Earlier, they had singled out these players earlier in the recruiting cycle as players that have traits that would translate to the next level and put them in a position to have success on the field on that big stage. Now, Syracuse, they're going up against these teams, but a lot of these players who have those offers are more regionally focused. Those big offers are nice, but it seems like they may be more regionally focused. Darian Williams is a player who could have played at pretty much any Big Ten school and almost any ACC school and a few of the SEC schools that were on him. He committed early in the process, and I think that if he had remained uncommitted, there would have been a lot more offers come his way. Penn State was on Darian Williams. They would have really liked to see more of him and potentially add him to this class. There are other guys like Terrell Wilfong. I think he was interested in Indiana. There's Luke Carney, a quarterback out of Texas, 4-star right now for us, and we'll see how that turns out in the rest of the ranking cycle. But Syracuse getting a guy like that this early in the process is it's a little unusual, right? This is a key indicator of Syracuse's uptick in recruiting momentum and just Fran Brown and his staff being a much more effective recruiting staff than the previous one. And, again, we're seeing it in these early dividends with players. I mentioned him earlier, too. Halim Muhammad, a guy like him, had a lot of options, and his recruitment seemed like it was picking up. And Syracuse was able to get him to commit before things really hit a high point in his recruiting process. So there are other players in this class who had other options, but Syracuse keeping them from really looking around and getting them on board, locking them in, a credit to Fran Brown and his staff and the relationships that they built, not only with the players, but with their families and their coaches, and just being able to have the confidence in this program that they're going to develop these players in the right way to get them to the NFL.
Yeah, and then obviously you got to hang on to these guys until signing day in December. This will be kind of different here for Syracuse as well, right, Adam? That like you've got some of these high caliber players that people want. Like you're going to have to hold off these big schools, right, for the next 6 months or so.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out. Some schools have different strategies right now with how much more structure is coming to the transfer portal. You're seeing teams really get a better idea of how many high school recruits they want versus transfer portal prospects. And so you might see some of these bigger schools go a little light on the high school prospects and heavier on the transfer portal prospects, or vice versa. Or it's going to vary on a team-by-team basis, but you may not see as many big schools poach mid-level or high-end 3 stars. So they might just only focus on trying to poach 4 stars and then fill in the holes with transfer portal prospects after the fact.
Yeah, what are you seeing, Adam, in sizes of recruiting classes? Because obviously they got rid of the 25 limit because, transfer portal out, sometimes you need to get more than that. So in the past, you'd say, wow, he's got 22 already. They only got room for a few more. Not the case. Like they could add more, and then the portal goes in. Have you noticed, teams are getting about the same amount of freshmen, less, more? How are teams handling the changes in the rules when it comes to that?
Well, so right now, during the where we are in the calendar and the recruiting cycle, a lot of teams are adding commitments left and right. But we're going to see most teams end still in that 20 range. Somewhere in that 15 to 20 range is kind of the sweet spot for high school recruits. Some teams are going to go over. Rutgers has 26. Syracuse, like you mentioned, 22. Notre Dame, 21 right now. But there are very few over 20 already at this point in the recruiting calendar. So we're going to see a lot of teams kind of finish close to 20 and then see how things turn out with their current roster during the season. As position battles kind of play out, you're going to have these teams are going to have a better idea of who's going to end up in the portal after the season, or if they want to try to poach some high-end, 4 stars or, some of those guys from other schools, they're going to have a chance to do that after those position battles on their roster pan out. So, we're going to see teams finish probably in that 20 range, some less, some more, but I think the transfer portal is going to be different for every team. They're all going to judge their situation on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, it's certainly added a wild variable to things here the last few years, that the second you think you have it figured out, you are completely incorrect because it changes every few months. Adam Friedman from Rivals with us. The one thing we've really been looking at here recently when it comes to Syracuse, Adam, is it's great to see the base of this class. You got a quarterback. You got a bunch of guys. You got the Northeast, kind of back in line the way it used to be back in the day for Syracuse. But now we're noticing, all right, there's a few 4 stars, it feels like, that are visiting every week. Like, what chance does Syracuse have to pick off any of these guys? The guy C.J. May was here the other day. Dwayne Galloway, an Ohio cornerback, was here over the weekend. What chance do you give Syracuse to snag one of these really big-time targets here down the line?
Yeah, you mentioned C.J. May. I feel pretty good about Syracuse and C.J. May right now. We'll have to see how the rest of the month goes. There'll be some more visits before he ends up making a decision. But, former Notre Dame commit early in the process. He's got really impressive measurables. Physically, just, he's one of those guys who gets off the bus and you're like, oh, okay, that's how they're supposed to look. And on the field, I've seen him in a couple of camps, and, he has the tools. It'll be interesting to see how he's coached up at the next level and what he turns out to be, whether it's a full-time defensive end or if he bumps inside after adding some mass when he gets to the college level. But DJ May, out of those few you mentioned, would be the one to keep an eye on right now. I like, I saw that the transfer quarterback Travis Throckmorton visited over the weekend as well. Definitely would keep an eye on him. There's a defensive back, Rayshon Andrews from St. Thomas More up there in Connecticut. I would also keep an eye on. He's got a couple other visits lined up, so we'll just kind of see what happens there. There's an interesting athlete out of Canada that I saw Syracuse offered as well. This is my first time really getting a look at his film just the other day. Nathan Nyandoro, I think I'm saying that last name right, a defensive end out of Canada who has a lot of traits that teams would really like to have on their roster. I think Boston College has also offered him. Keep an eye on him down the road. And then I saw Sebastian Broughton visited from I think he visited from Florida.
Yep.
And there are a few other guys that Syracuse is making progress on, and we'll just have to see how the rest of this month pans out, because these kids are taking visits. Some of them are taking 2 official visits a week right now, because there's no limit on how many official visits they can take anymore. So there are going to be changes coming to their recruiting process, almost daily until they end up making that decision. So very fluid right now on the recruiting trail for Syracuse.
Well, Adam, it's fun times. It's a month that I know has been very important in recruiting for years and years and years, and we've never talked about it because not a lot has happened. But now things won't stop happening around here. So it is fun to watch from our end, as I'm sure you know. But Adam, thanks so much for the time. We'll check it again before too long, as we get used to this whole big-time recruiting thing up here. But thanks a lot.
Thank you, Brian. Appreciate you guys.
All right, there he is, Adam Friedman, the rankings director of Rivals.com. So if you see a star value, he's the guy helping putting the stars next to it, and Syracuse is getting the good ones now. So that's good. Yes, good football players, good to get, win games, draft, the whole thing. It all goes together, does it not? Great to chat with Adam from Rivals.com. We'll certainly touch base with him as we get later on in the recruiting process as well. Likely have Mike McAllister on later this week for a little more in-depth on the specifics that happened this weekend as well. On official visit weekend 3 of this very important June of Fran putting together his first full class as a Syracuse head coach. All right, let's take a break in this hour, brought to you by William Attar. Phone lines open when we come back at 315-437-7644 for ESPN 44. Much more to get to as well. Tim Leonard next hour. Why? Because he was at the U.S. Open yesterday. Man, compelling. Probably not if you're Rory. But whew, it was a watch yesterday. Bryson, Rory, collapsing, putts, bunker shots, great stuff. Tim was there. He'll join us next hour. Here, when we come back, lots to get into as well after this here on Q Sports Talk and ESPN Radio.